All right, I'm going to kick us off for the second pillar of the day. So just in case you are new and need an orientation, there are 5 pillars that we are taking you through to build a consistent client growth engine where the sky's the limit. And we've been talking about a waterfall effect. I thought I'd take a moment to just explain why we use this analogy. So a waterfall is an amazing thing in the force of the world. It can change the trajectory of the landscape, just like you can change the trajectory of the landscape for you, your family, for the lives that you impact, clients, peers, and others. But a waterfall doesn't happen only in its finished product that you can see. A waterfall actually starts with one drop. One drop becomes another, becomes another, becomes another, and that's what creates a waterfall. And so my challenge to you today as your event host is to get off zero, to be the first drop, to use that one focused mentality to really build significance. And in pillar 2, we want to talk about developing relationships with your next buyer, because you've got the opportunity now to cast your vision. It's now to start moving pieces. And there's 2 pieces of this puzzle in this pillar. The first, we want to talk about scaling and getting in front of more people, more ways, more often. Podcast guesting can be a great strategy to do that. And we're also going to talk about nurture, appreciate, and retain your client relationship, because it is the formula for relationship-driven growth. So I want to bring up our next speaker and talk about the first piece of the puzzle. So let me do that. Welcome. Guys, if you haven't yet had the pleasure to meet Mark Hayward, coming all the way late in the evening in the UK time zone, you are in for a treat. He was in the world of podcasting before podcasting became trendy and new. His podcast has hundreds, and I mean hundreds and hundreds of episodes. He's been around that long, and he's going to tell us through podcasting. And I think one of the most common questions, Mark, I want to ask you before I give you the floor is,
yep.
Has the season of podcasting passed us? Because a lot of people are like thinking I missed the bandwagon. Have they?
No, absolutely not. The thing about podcasting is that it's been going a long time, but it goes in waves. And what I think we're at the stage now is that it's becoming mainstream, and that it's now getting to a much wider audience across different age groups, across different backgrounds, and that podcasting now has become a platform that you can start targeting clients. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today.
I love it. So guys, if you think you are still curious, and I know several people here, I know Christine has a podcast, I have a podcast, Mark has a podcast, Carolyn already has a podcast launching something new. You haven't missed the boat. This has gone mainstream. Welcome to the world of podcasting. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to share my screen. Can you enable me to share my screen, Christine?
I can absolutely do that. Give me 1 second to find you.
Sure.
Should have, there we go.
Right, let's go. Still saying disabled. Let's try again. There we go. Right. Right, can everyone see that? Just give me a quick yes, if you can.
Yes, we can.
Right. Thank you, Christine. Right. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Christine, for the introduction and the invite as well. And thank you very much to the Turn On Your Client Waterfall community. So as Christine said, my name is Mark Hayward. I am a host of a business show called Business Growth Talks, which has just released its 550th episode. I've been doing it for over 7.5 years, and I interview guests that are talking about how they've grown and scaled their business. What we're going to target today is my other side, is where I'm a founder of a company called Podcast Introduction. And that is what we're going to talk about today, is about how podcast guesting can grow your business. So podcast guesting is more than PR. It's actually a business development tool which can help you grow your business. So I'm going to be talking about how it can be a lead gen and helping you create a clear strategy on how you grow your business. Now, take into consideration that, yes, I do have a guesting service where I help people get on other people's shows, but there's also a way of being able to do that as a DIY service as well. So when I'm talking through today, either think about ways of you potentially be able to do it yourself, or if you need or want the assistance of me and my company, then you're more than welcome to reach out to me. So why is podcast booming? So currently, recent research has shown that there's 460 million podcast listeners, and that is growing fast. And in the US, you've got over 250 million listeners to podcasts that are listening to it regularly. And that's from a company called Edison Research. I always think it's important to notify where these statistics come from, because anyone can make a bold claim, but this is actually a company in the UK that looks at UK and US that looks at research for audio as well as video as well. So one of the things that I think the podcast guesting is growing is, and why it's growing, is that listeners build trust with their podcast hosts and their guests as well. It builds immediate credibility. It is a long form format. If you're not aware, there are so many different types of shows. Sometimes there's very focus driven 20-minute shows. Sometimes there's longer shows, sort of 30, 60, 90 minutes long. And this gives you a way of having long-term content, which creates a deeper connection with your audience, and it gives you space to be able to educate as well as create that credibility and trust. One of the great things about podcasting in most cases is that it's evergreen content. So it works for you long after your release. I'm going to give you a case study earlier on, but I'll give you a quick insight into this. One of our clients who worked with us just over a year ago, 18 months ago, reached out to me recently and said one of the episodes that he did has triggered a lead to contact him, and this show was probably recorded over a year ago. So it's evergreen content and can keep on giving you value long after the release date. And podcasting now is now a core channel for thought leadership and lead generation. Most of our clients that work with us are either working in those two different areas. They're either wanting to be known as that go-to person, that thought leader in their business, or they're looking to generate leads and sales with using podcast guesting. And as we've said a couple of times now, it is now mainstream. It is you're now getting to larger audience that are looking to consume their content and looking to consume content on podcasting. So let's talk about the guesting feeds the client waterfall to relate back to Christine's event today. So podcasting isn't just about exposure. I believe that it is a strategic marketing engine that nurtures prospects across the entire client journey, from awareness to decision to conversion. And what often happens with PR, and we're talking about PR when it comes to newspapers, magazines, television, radio, is that it's often based around exposure. But we are getting you on the shows that are most impactful for you. So if you're a marketing expert, we'll get you on marketing shows. If your ideal client is actually a business owner, a small business owner, or an executive, we can get you on those targeted shows that you can speak to that audience. So we're talking about visibility and getting discovered on with new audiences. Guesting gives you an instant visibility on someone else's platform. When you show up, you get authority and value. Listeners want you as credible, and that is the first step towards trust. And trust is what leads to inquiries, leads, and eventually new clients. Unlike ads or cold outreach, podcast interviews are warm and personal. You're having a real conversation with hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands, even in some cases, hundreds of thousands of listeners. So it is a scalable trust building exercise without you having to chase that target demographic. If you're paying for ads, you know what it's like. You know that you're targeting that audience, where you can do this by going on a podcast and having a conversation. So the key to success is showing up on the right podcasts with the right messages. When your story and your expertise matches your audience, the results are powerful. It's not just about being everywhere, it's about where it matters. So we will help you get those messages. So something that we do, which I think is different to other providers, is that we will help you with your key messages. We will help you with your storytelling. We've got exercises for you to be able to do that. We also help you with equipment, basic equipment that you need, as well as all the other aspects like rapport with host as well. And guesting just isn't just a vanity metric. You can get downloads that are really going to affect your audience. When you look at larger shows, they're very much a general audience that you're doing, whether you're getting on. Where podcasting is about depth, not just breadth. So focusing on who hears you and how it's not necessarily how many people that are hearing you. So as I said, it gives you awareness. New people hear your name and your expertise, gives you consideration. They listen to your thinking and your values is really important as well. The decision, your presence and authority on making that decision easier for them to buy from you. And the action with the right call to action, which we will help you with as well. They will take that listening to that episode or watching that episode on YouTube, and they will visit your website. They will book a call. They will download a lead magnet, and hopefully will get you into the position where they're buying from you. So I've developed these 5 C's framework of high impact guesting. So it's credibility, conversation, content, conversion, and clarity. So I'm going to go through these different sections to give you an idea of why it's important and the impact that it can have. So let's start with clarity. You know who you're talking to and why. It's crystal clear who your audience is, what industry it is, what pain points you're getting, the stage of awareness that they're in. And we refine your value proposition so that it's relevant to your audience that you're speaking to. And we often give an example of you don't want to be talking to everyone. You want to be focusing on your ideal client and referral partners. Next section is credibility. So authority comes from demonstrating your experience and your results. As I said, we help you with key messaging that you want to be able to communicate with your audience, and that should be prepared with stories that will evolve as you're working through those exercises with me. And just think about creating concise, specific stories of transformation, success, or insights that you have. Stories are the emotional connection with the audience, and this is the key to podcast guesting. Just remember, facts tell, but stories sell. The next section I want to talk about is conversation. So you want to be human. Great podcast guests talk like people, not like robotic pitch decks talking to an audience. Engage with the host, listen to a few episodes and be present and not distracted, and make the conversation engaging and interesting. Now, it's important we talk about being prepared, but you don't want to over rehearse your answers. The key points that you need to have part of your arsenal of having these conversations need to flow naturally. This is actually a skill in itself. Being prepared is important, but being present and going with the flow of the conversation will resonate with your audience better. And you need to aim for energy, empathy, and authenticity. This is what listeners lean into. Next section is content. Now, one of the great things about podcasting is that with every episode that you record, I think you should be creating at least 10 pieces of content. So that means repurposing the content. So that could be social media posts, blog posts, email newsletter content, Wherever you are present online and active, you should be resharing this content. And that means cutting up maybe a 60-minute episode into 60 to 90-second clips that you can share on LinkedIn really well. And it explains where you're adding your value, where your genius is. This will increase your ROI and reinforces your authority across multiple platforms. A little tip for you: if you do it yourself and you're getting this content from the podcaster, make sure you ask for the video file, and because it makes it much easier to repurpose. And you can work with us and we can help you repurpose that content, or you can hire someone on a Fiverr or an Upwork to be able to repurpose that content. And lastly, of the 5 C's is conversion. So you need to be able to have that call to action. You don't want to be doing a hard pitch. You want to invite people in and not sell. Offer a free resource like an ebook, a lead magnet, a giveaway, a discovery call, or invite people to connect on your social media platform. Most of you here, probably that's LinkedIn. And make it relevant to the episode topic. So you just need to think about how to get that call to action to turn attention into action. So I mentioned to you about a case study that I wanted to share with you. This was a leadership coach that worked with us, and he guested on 24 shows in 12 months, which is one of the packages that we offer. He was able to gain 3 high-end ticket clients directly from listeners that have paid for his coaching. And unexpectedly, one of the shows that he engaged with the host, he actually partnershiped with them, and now they've created a new course. This was definitely unexpected, but shows the value that content and generating leads are in the partnership with hosts. And just a little fun fact, my business partner in this business is a guy called George McGarren, and he was actually a guest on my show. And this just shows you that we are actually living proof that partnerships and businesses can start when you're guesting on other people's shows. And this proves that consistent strategic guesting brings you that ROI. It can all be fun. It can be enjoyable being a guest on the show. But you need to think about how you're thinking about leads, partnerships. And as I said earlier, he actually got a client that he actually finished. The release was like over a year ago, and they went back and listened to the back catalog, found him, and then connected with him because they wanted to work with him. Right. This is just a little insight into what a bad guest is versus a great guest. So bad guests just talk about themselves. Great guests solve people's problems. Poor guests spend most of their time self-promoting. They list in their credentials, telling their life story without a relevance to the audience. Great gifts shift the spotlight of the listener to what is actually in it for the audience. They solve real problems by sharing insights, mindset shifts, strategies, or tactics that listeners can actually act on. Great guests, they share stories, frameworks, and audience-specific tips. Stories make information stick. Use them to illustrate a challenge that you had, a turning point, and a result. Little fun fact on podcasting, one of the best things that I have on my show is when people share a challenge that they had and how they overcome it. That can be a really impactful story because people want to hear about your failures as much as they want to hear about your successes. And you need to think about making it specific to the audience that you're on. So what might work for a startup founder won't work with enterprise executives. You need to be relatable. As I said, not to rehearse too much. Over-polished, robotic interviews feel like a marketing pitch. Let your tone be warm, human, and conversational. As I said, admit missteps, laugh, pause, and then continue. You need to be building trust and connection with that audience. So think of it like having a coffee with a friend. It's not a keynote speech. The goal is to have impact and leave people with value. It's not about sounding impressive. It's about being useful, insightful, and memorable. So think about sharing takeaways listeners can act on immediately. And when they want to look you up, see your evidence of whether it's on a website or a LinkedIn profile, they'll be able to be backed up with that information that you've provided on the show. And always think about being concise and inviting the listener in. So calls to action need to be natural, a natural extension of that conversation, not a hard sales pitch. Right, finding the right podcast. So I'm going to give you some examples of how you can do that from a DIY service, and I'll just give you a little insight into what we do. So you need to start with, who are you aligning the shows that you want to be on? Don't just think you want to be on the big shows, because what you'll find is industry specific problem solving, mindset, leadership, and entrepreneurships are common shows that you might want to be on. But think about targeting niche shows, because that can actually give you greater impact than you may think. You may think you need to be on the biggest shows, and you absolutely don't. I've got a ton of examples of where people have been on smaller shows, and because the engagement of the audience is much bigger, they can get their generating of their leads and sales. So, as I said, targeted shows and connecting with the audience is an amazing way of being able to get to those niche audience that you might be targeting. So tools like Listen Notes, Podchaser, and Ruphonic are just ways of being able to search a key topic, audience size, and guest type. So these are ways of being able to do the market research to be able to find the shows. These platforms will show shows that interview guests, how often they publish, what kinds of questions they ask, and what their peers of the other shows on that same niche. So you might want to be tracking the long-term marketing strategy by doing that outreach and having a little tool, whether it's Google Sheets or a CRM, making sure that you're following up with those. So always check the show's tone, the guest style, and the audience fit. Before pitching to one, think about, is this something that you want to be on? So we advise you to listen to a few of the episodes. Think about whether it's conversational or whether it's more formal, whether it's sort of short, snappy, pointed 20-minute shows where you're just talking about a deep dive into a particular area of your expertise, or whether they are journey-based shows that are able to give the audience a little bit more about you, your values, what inspired you, what built you, what made you to this point. So just think about those shows that you want to go on. And it's about building relationships. So you might want to follow the host on LinkedIn or Instagram before you pitch to them. Leave thoughtful comments on their posts or review their show. And then after the interview, keep in touch. I was a guest on Christine's show, and that's how I got invited to speak today. So it's a really great way of thinking about relationship marketing rather than just a one-off exposure and promotional tactic to be on one show. Now, I feel this point is a nice point just to mention about what we do and how it's different from doing it yourself. So we research, vet the shows that are based on your ideal client or your message that you want to get out. It will be to your targeted audience. Our team look for relevant shows that fit your style and have quality audiences. And it's not just about the biggest shows. We focus on building relationships with podcast hosts. We have really great contacts on many, many areas of business. And we send out the outreach to them and then connect you with a podcaster to be able to set it up. We create a bio for you. You get 60 minutes worth of content from me on a kickoff call. So there's a lot more that we can provide than doing it yourself, but it is an active strategy that you should consider if you don't want to work with us. It's entirely up to you whether you go a DIY service or whether you work with us. And then making every interview work for yourself. So podcasting isn't just that moment of the podcast goes live. It's all about building conversation and relationships. So just looking at this, we've talked about the repurposing of content and how it should be in your email newsletter, sales calls, presentations, and content and calendars is a great way of doing that. Think about how you're going to do that on maybe your website. A lot of people put a media tab on their website and put their episodes on there. That's a great way of doing that. Also, putting on featured sections in your LinkedIn profile. You can put it as an email signature. That's a fun way of being able to put maybe a clip, a really impactful clip. And think about how you can incorporate it into pitch decks or proposals, because this will just build trust and credibility with whoever you're talking to. And I just want to touch on the last point about the call to action. This is a really important and often understated area of being a podcast guest. So it doesn't have to be hard selling constantly throughout the show. Invite people to connect with you and explore the other content that you've got. Great calls to action includes free tools, LinkedIn invites, or even bonus content. Be direct about your call to action, but not pushy. Think of it like a warm handshake that you're having with someone towards an end of a conversation. And you want them to feel curious about you and support you. And the best call to action makes them feel like it's a natural continuation of the conversation that you're having on the show. Right, just to finish up, last slide. This is one of the most leveraged ways of being able to grow your business by using podcast guesting. I've talked a number of times about visibility, trust, and consistent client flow of being able to grow your business. If you want to help building podcast guesting as a strategy, then by all means, connect with me. You've got my LinkedIn profile. You can go onto our website and set up a discovery call on there. And just think about this. You don't have to be famous or an extrovert to be on a podcast. It's more about how you show up with your values and how you deliver to your clients. So if anyone wants to connect with me, reach out to me on those places. But thank you very much for listening. And thank you, Christine, for having me as a guest.
I love this. And I'm going to also pop in the link, guys, if you want to have an opportunity to listen to the interview I had with Mark, because he gave you a masterclass in this right here, right now. And I want to tell you a story twofold. Mark talked about unexpected opportunities coming from something you cast into the World Wide Web through a podcast. Many, many years ago, I knew that being in video content would help my business. I didn't have a strategy for it. I wasn't ready for that level of complexity, but I knew at some point it would be valid. Well, then comes ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is using podcast content as a trusted resource. And a friend of mine was starting her business. She was in South Africa, moved to Dubai, and she asked ChatGPT about how do you build trust and reciprocity. And my podcast showed up as number 5 as the answer. I did nothing to do it. It showed up. She landed her first client and sent me the screenshot. And she's like, you just helped me close my first client. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea what the ripple effect would be. And that's why you start now. Mark just said it's mainstream. And you don't have to go create your own show. You don't have to establish authority in that way. You can borrow somebody else's authority by being a guest. And I have my podcast, which you'll see, this is the episode that we shared in the chat. Here's your free gift. Our episode, my podcast, was a long-term play. It was never about clients for me. I wanted to find people like Mark in my network that I thought you should hire him if you need support, or Carolyn or Jen. And I said, I'm going to use my podcast to find great resources for my clients to hire when they're ready for the tactic. And I will help them with his strategy integration. I was a guest on somebody else's platform. Somebody listened to their show, then found my show. She binge watched our content. She's like, I want you to be on my show. I'm like, okay, we're talking on the show. And she's like, actually, I think I need to hire you. And I'm like, well, how did we all get here? By casting the first domino and getting off zero. Podcasting is a long tail strategy. You don't know where it will wildly go. Episodes that come up could be current. They could be from 5 years ago. So when you pick your topics and you pick your impact and you pick your resource, what do you want to be known for in a couple of years' time? Should be still relevant, because Mark's example and masterclass just showed us how he has created 500 episodes in his show. Mark, one final thought on this, because you said it's mainstream. And I love that you said do something with the episode, because I can't tell you how many guests come onto my show and do nothing with the content. Boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Tell us your favorite story of a guest that you have encountered in the last year.
Oh, there's so many. And I will, while I'm speaking, I will think of an example, but so I release weekly, and so I'm constantly on this conveyor belt of meeting people, connecting with people, starting relationships, seeing where I can explore that. I now have a digital Rolodex that when I'm doing other networking and working with other people, if they're saying to me, I'm part of another group, and they say to me, oh, I'm looking for someone in digital marketing, or I'm looking for someone, a leadership coach or a career coach. I now have, I've probably got 280 episodes with interviews. So I've got over 280 people in my connections, and I can lean into that, and I can connect people with that. So that's a fantastic way for me personally that I've been able to leverage it's almost like a networking group that I get to speak to people. And the hosting side is great because you're you're building those relationships over a number of weeks, months, and years, and they can be impactful. As a guest, you're actually hacking into the other people's audience. And this is why I think it's a great way of, and the focus is all on you as a guest. The focus is on your story, your value, what you're doing to change the world, to impact the world, to impact your clients. And that's why guesting is often a very good starting point for people, because they can see the process of going through a number of episodes, getting a gauge of what they might like. There's been clients of ours that have then started their show after working with us for a year. So it's a fantastic way of being a marketing strategy for that. I genuinely believe it's a marketing strategy that can help you grow your business. But then just think about all the relationships that you're going to be able to grow and build with this exposure. And in the back of your mind, some of you won't, but some of you might be thinking at some stage, I might want to start my show. And it really isn't too late to start a show. People are coming from all different age groups, all different backgrounds, like the 464 million globally, over 250 million in the US. These are now significant numbers, and I just think it's an amazing way of being able to do a lot for your confidence, grow your confidence as being a guest, but also think of it as a strategy that you can then generate leads and sales.
I love that. And I will say it's a journey, because I always joke, Mark and I have been at this game a long time. He's 500 episodes. I think we have released about 155. And I would love to go back and scrub my first episode, because
Oh
to
yeah,
me,
me too.
I'm a hot mess in it. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I haven't created a formula for success. And I had a good friend. Carolyn is actually episode number 2. Go back, watch at the very beginning. She was one of my very first people I phoned and said, come and do this with me. And you get better with a lived experience. And now,
Yeah,
many years into this, because I chose it as a core strategic way to build relationships, to add value to my network, which is what you just said, guess what? I have this whole repertoire when I'm coaching clients, and I'm like, you want to go back and see that issue? I have an episode on that. Go back and use it.
yeah,
But you've got to think about using it, because if it's just the way you spend your time, you are missing a huge upside that's possible.
absolutely.
Thank you, Mark. Loved it. Guys, go watch our recording. Thanks for being here. Can't wait to see more of you.